family humiliated me, won millions in lottery and hid it. Revenge was perfect. I stood in the front row of that glittering charity gala, watching my son's face turn ash-white as his photograph flashed on the 60-foot screen behind the podium. The presenter's voice echoed through the ballroom, "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our most generous anonymous donors, David and Michelle Patterson, for their $12 million contribution to dementia research." The applause was thunderous. I smiled and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "You said I'd die broke and confused, David. Now you will." My name is Martha Patterson, and at 70 years old, I've learned that family can be the cruelest enemy of all. For 43 years, I worked as a registered nurse at Presbyterian Hospital in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. The early morning shifts, the double overtime during flu season, the countless hours spent caring for strangers who appreciated my dedication more than my own family ever would. I raised 3 children essentially alone after my husband Thomas died of a massive heart attack at 52, leaving me with a mortgage, 3 teenagers, and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from grieving while trying to hold everything together. David, my oldest, became a lawyer specializing in estate planning and elder law. The irony of that career choice would become apparent later. Sarah moved to California after college and calls twice a year on Christmas and my birthday, our conversations lasting exactly long enough for her to feel like she's fulfilled some obligation. Michael, my baby, my sweet boy who always brought me wildflowers from the neighbor's garden, died in Afghanistan in 2009. His death broke something in me that never quite healed right, leaving me even more dependent on my surviving children for emotional connection. After Thomas passed, I poured everything into those kids with the desperate intensity of someone who couldn't bear another loss. I worked double shifts to pay for David's law school at Duke University, a prestigious education that cost me nearly $60,000 in loans I was still paying off when I turned 65. I mortgaged the house twice to help him buy his first practice downtown, co-signing papers that made me responsible for debts I couldn't afford if his business failed. When he married Michelle, a blonde real estate agent with manicured nails and a smile that never reached her eyes, I bit my tongue about my instinctive dislike and welcomed her into our family with the kind of grace my mother had taught me. Michelle treated me like hired help from the very beginning. She'd arrive at family gatherings with a list of tasks for me to complete, assuming I'd cook, clean, and serve while she entertained. When they had Sophia, their only child, I became the unofficial full-time babysitter, watching my granddaughter every weekend so David and Michelle could travel to wine country or take couples trips to Charleston. I never complained, never asked for compensation, never pointed out that my knees ached from chasing a toddler around or that my Saturday mornings were no longer my own. I cooked elaborate holiday dinners for 20 people, spending 3 days in preparation and 5 hours cleaning up afterward, usually alone because David and Michelle always had somewhere important to be. I made Sophia's Halloween costumes by hand, attended every school play and soccer game, helped with homework when her parents were too busy with their careers to bother. I thought that's what mothers and grandmothers do. I thought love meant sacrifice without question, support without limits, giving until it hurt and then giving some more. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in my quiet retirement. October 15, 2019. I'd just retired the month before after 4 decades of nursing, and I was still adjusting to having nowhere urgent to be, no patients depending on me, no schedule requiring me to be dressed and functional by 5:30 in the morning. The house felt too quiet without the familiar rhythm of my work routine, too empty without the sense of purpose that had defined my adult life. I was sorting through old medical journals, deciding what to donate to the nursing school at UNC Charlotte, when I decided to walk to Chen's corner store for milk and coffee. Mrs. Chen had been a fixture in the neighborhood for 15 years, a tiny Taiwanese woman who somehow remembered every customer's preferences and always asked about my arthritis with genuine concern. Her store was old-fashioned, cramped with narrow aisles and shelves stocked floor to ceiling with everything from emergency batteries to homemade dumplings. That particular morning, she was unusually excited about something. "Martha," she called out before I'd even made it to the dairy section, "you must try this new lottery game. Very lucky numbers today, I can feel it." She gestured toward a display of colorful scratch-off tickets near the register, each one promising instant riches with odds so astronomical ID never bothered to calculate them. I never gambled. I barely played church bingo, and that was only because the proceeds supported the youth program. But something about Mrs. Chen's enthusiasm, her absolute certainty that luck was in the air, made me pull out my worn leather wallet and extract a $5 bill. $5 lucky numbers, the ticket read, with silver spaces to scratch off and a prize structure that seemed designed to separate desperate people from their grocery money. I didn't scratch it there in the store. Mrs. Chen was busy with other customers, and something about the moment felt too private, too important to share with strangers buying cigarettes and energy drinks. I walked home slowly, the ticket safely tucked in my coat pocket, enjoying the crisp autumn air and the way the morning sun filtered through the oak trees that lined our street. Back in my kitchen, I made myself a proper cup of tea, Earl Grey with honey, and sat at the same wooden table where ID paid bills and helped with homework and planned meals for 37 years. The silver quarter ID been using to open medication packages for decades felt surprisingly heavy in my fingers as I approached the ticket with the kind of methodical care ID once reserved for checking drug dosages. The first number matched. 7. I blinked and checked again. Still 7. The second number matched. 14. My hands started trembling. The third number, 23. The fourth, 31. The fifth, 42. The sixth and final number, 49. All 6 numbers matched perfectly, exactly, undeniably. $12 million. The words on the ticket swam before my eyes. Winner, $12 million. Congratulations. Contact lottery office immediately. I must have stared at that piece of paper for an hour, checking and rechecking the numbers, certain I was misreading something, certain this couldn't be real. I called the state lottery office and had them verify the numbers over the phone twice, my voice shaking as I read each digit aloud. Congratulations, Mrs. Patterson, the pleasant woman on the other end said. You're our biggest winner this year. You'll need to come to Raleigh to claim your prize, but yes, this is definitely a winning ticket worth $12 million. The reality hit me like ice water in my veins. After a lifetime of worrying about grocery bills and utility payments, of stretching every dollar until it screamed, of working extra shifts to pay for my children's dreams, I was suddenly wealthy beyond anything I'd ever imagined. $12 million. More money than I'd earned in 43 years of nursing combined. My first instinct was to call David. He was my oldest, my advisor on all things important, the successful lawyer who handled my taxes and insurance and most of my complicated paperwork. Surely he'd know what to do, how to handle something this enormous properly. I was trembling when I dialed his number, the winning ticket still clutched in my free hand. David answered on the second ring, his voice crisp and professional. Patterson Law Offices, David speaking. David, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I need to tell you something incredible. I won the lottery. There was a pause, the kind of silence that stretches long enough to become uncomfortable. Mom? Is that you? What are you talking about? I won $12 million, David. I have the ticket right here in my kitchen. All 6 numbers matched perfectly. Another pause, longer this time, filled with something I couldn't quite identify. Mom, are you feeling all right? Have you been taking your medications regularly? The question stung. I'd been managing my own medications successfully for 70 years. I'm completely fine, honey. I know how this sounds, but I really won. I have the ticket. I've checked the numbers 17 times, and I called the lottery office to verify. His voice took on that careful, patronizing tone I'd heard him use with elderly clients, the one that suggested he was talking to someone whose mental faculties might not be entirely reliable. Mom, I think you might be confused about what you're seeing. Why don't Michelle and I come over, and we can look at this together? Sometimes these promotional tickets can be misleading. I wasn't confused. I was holding $12 million in my shaking hands, staring at numbers that matched exactly with the official lottery drawing results I'd double-checked online. But something in David's voice planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't quite shake. Maybe I should wait, verify everything one more time before making this news public. David and Michelle arrived within an hour, Michelle trailing behind him with that pinched expression she wore whenever she had to enter my modest house with its outdated furniture and worn carpets. They sat across from me at the kitchen table, David's expensive suit looking out of place in my humble breakfast nook. I showed them the ticket with the pride of someone sharing miraculous news. I pointed out each matching number, had the lottery website pulled up on my old laptop computer, even showed them the printout ID made of the official drawing results. Everything matched. Everything was perfect. David examined the ticket with the careful attention he usually reserved for legal documents, his expression growing more concerned with each passing moment. "Mom," he said finally, his voice gentle but firm, "I think you're misreading these numbers. See here? This 7 could be mistaken for a 1 from this angle if you're not wearing your reading glasses. And this number you think is a 9 is actually a 6 when you look at it closely." That wasn't true. I could see the numbers as clearly as I could see his face. But David was smart, educated, successful. Had graduated summa cum laude from law school, built a thriving practice from nothing, earned respect in the legal community. Maybe I was missing something. Maybe the excitement was affecting my vision, making me see what I desperately wanted to see rather than what was actually printed on the ticket. Michelle leaned forward with the kind of syrupy sympathy that made my skin crawl. "Martha, honey, this kind of confusion is completely normal for people your age. My grandmother went through the exact same thing when she was 70. She once thought she'd won a cruise to the Caribbean, but it turned out to be just a promotional mailer designed to look like a prize notification." I looked at the ticket again, squinting at the numbers that had seemed so clear just moments before. 7 was 7. 14 was 14. But doubt crept in like cold air through a cracked window, insidious and impossible to ignore. "Let me hold on to this for you, Mom," David said gently, reaching across the table with his manicured hand. "I'll have someone at my office take a proper look, maybe have an expert verify whether there's any chance of confusion. We want to make sure you don't get your hopes up unnecessarily." I should have said no. I should have trusted my own eyes, my own mind, my own perfectly functioning 70-year-old brain that had successfully managed complex medical calculations for 4 decades. Instead, I found myself handing over the most important piece of paper I'd ever held, watching it disappear into David's expensive briefcase like a dream evaporating in morning light. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over, trying to understand why something that had felt so certain now seemed so questionable. David had always been protective, maybe overly so since Thomas died. Had taken over my financial affairs gradually, helping with tax preparation, insurance claims, investment decisions I felt too inexperienced to make alone. If he said I was confused, maybe I was. But deep in my chest, underneath the doubt and uncertainty, a small voice insisted that I knew what I'd seen. Those numbers had matched. That ticket was real. $12 million was mine. The next morning, David called with news that made my stomach drop to my feet. "Mom, I had 3 different people at my office examine your ticket. I'm sorry, but you didn't win anything. The numbers don't match the official drawing. I think maybe you need to have your eyes checked, or possibly talk to Dr. Henderson about adjusting your medications. Sometimes certain prescriptions can cause confusion or even mild hallucinations." The word hallucinations hit me like a physical blow. I'd never hallucinated anything in my life. I'd spent decades administering medications that could cause such side effects, and I knew my own mental state better than anyone. But David sounded so certain, so professionally confident, that I began questioning everything I thought I knew about that miraculous morning. Over the following weeks, things escalated with frightening speed. David started visiting daily, sometimes alone, sometimes with Michelle, always wearing expressions of loving concern that felt increasingly patronizing. They talked about memory issues, about how normal it was for people my age to become confused about details, to experience false memories that seemed completely real to the person experiencing them. I started questioning everything. Had I misread the numbers? Was I developing dementia like Thomas' father had in his final years? The possibility terrified me more than I could admit, more than any physical illness or financial hardship ever had. The idea of losing my mind, of becoming someone I didn't recognize, of burdening my family with care I couldn't reciprocate, was my deepest nightmare made manifest. Then came the doctor's appointments that David insisted were necessary for my well-being. Dr. Henderson had been my physician for 12 years, a kindly man in his 60s who'd seen me through Thomas' death, Michael's deployment and subsequent loss, and various minor health issues that came with aging. The comprehensive evaluation he ordered was exhaustive and deeply humiliating. Memory assessments where I was asked to repeat lists of words, cognitive function tests that seemed designed to make me feel stupid, questions about what year it was and who was president and what ID had for breakfast. I answered everything correctly, but Dr. Henderson seemed skeptical when I mentioned the lottery ticket, exchanging meaningful glances with David that made me feel like a child being discussed by adults. Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Henderson said in that careful tone doctors use when delivering unwelcome news, your son David is understandably concerned about some episodes of confusion you've been experiencing lately. False memories, particularly about significant financial windfalls, can be an early warning sign of cognitive decline. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but it is something we need to monitor carefully. I protested. I told him I was certain about what I'd seen, that my memory was fine, that I'd been managing my own affairs successfully for decades. But David was there, nodding gravely, providing examples of other times I'd supposedly been confused lately. Times I didn't remember being confused about at all. According to David, I'd forgotten appointments, repeated questions, left grocery lists in strange places, shown up to events on the wrong day. None of it sounded familiar, but the accumulation of incidents painted a picture of someone whose mental faculties were clearly declining. The diagnosis came 2 weeks later, early-stage dementia with episodes of confabulation and false memory formation. David was granted conservatorship over my finances within a month, all for my own protection, he explained with the kind of patient concern that made me want to scream. I moved through those early months in a fog of disbelief and crushing self-doubt. Maybe they were right. Maybe my mind was failing in ways I couldn't recognize. The alternative, that my own son would lie to me, manipulate me, steal from me, seemed impossible to accept. David loved me. Had always been protective, maybe too protective, but surely not maliciously so. But impossibility has a way of revealing itself slowly, one small inconsistency at a time. It started with the house repairs that suddenly became urgent necessities. David mentioned several times that my old Victorian home needed major work to remain safe and habitable. New roof, updated plumbing, complete electrical system overhaul. The estimates he showed me were astronomical. $43,000 for the roof alone. $37,000 for electrical work. $28,000 for plumbing updates. But when the contractors supposedly came to perform this expensive work, I watched from my bedroom window as they spent 15 minutes examining the exterior and drove away without entering the house. The electrician David claimed had rewired the kitchen never set foot inside my home. Yet his detailed reports described extensive work being completed, payments made from my accounts to cover costs that seemed to exist only on paper. Then there was Michelle's sudden prosperity that coincided perfectly with my supposed mental decline. New jewelry that caught the light when she moved, designer handbags that cost more than I used to spend on groceries for a month, a gleaming Mercedes convertible that appeared in their driveway seemingly overnight. When I asked about these expensive acquisitions, Michelle laughed and said David's practice was doing wonderfully well, that elder law was apparently a booming field. The doubt that had been eating at me for months began to crystallize into something sharper, more focused, more dangerous to anyone who might be underestimating my mental capacity. I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. I watched. I listened. I remembered. And slowly, carefully, with the methodical patience ID learned from 43 years of nursing, I started to plan. The first thing I did was visit Mrs. Chin at her corner store, pretending to be confused about the date ID bought the lottery ticket. She remembered perfectly, down to the exact time and her prediction about lucky numbers. She even had security camera footage from that week stored on her computer system, digital files that went back months. Together, we sat in her cramped office behind the store and watched the grainy black and white video of me purchasing ticket number 7749823. The timestamp was clear and undeniable, October 15, 2019, 10:47 a.m. Mrs. Chin printed out a copy for me, along with the receipt that showed the exact ticket number. Next, I went to the public library and used their computers to look up lottery results for that specific date, printing out official documentation from the state lottery website. My hands shook as I compared the winning numbers with my memory: 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, 49. Those were exactly the numbers I remembered matching on my ticket. Not similar numbers. Not numbers that could be confused if viewed from the wrong angle. Exactly the same numbers. I had won $12 million. My son had stolen it from me and convinced everyone, including a respected physician, that I was losing my mind. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd experienced in 7 decades of living. It was hot and cold. Simultaneously, pure and focused like a laser cutting through steel. But underneath the anger was something even more powerful and dangerous, the crystal clear certainty that I was going to get justice, and that justice was going to be both complete and devastating. Not the quick, emotional justice of confrontation and accusations. They could claim I was delusional, confused, mentally incompetent. Dr. Henderson's diagnosis gave them perfect cover for dismissing anything I said as the ravings of a diseased mind. I needed something more elegant, more final, more undeniably real. I needed evidence that couldn't be dismissed, explained away, or attributed to dementia. For the next 6 months, I played the part of the confused elderly woman with Academy Award-worthy precision. I asked the same questions multiple times during conversations. I forgot appointments that I'd actually remembered perfectly. I left grocery lists in odd places where David would find them. I gave my son and daughter-in-law exactly what they expected to see, a 70-year-old woman whose mind was slowly but inexorably failing. But behind this carefully crafted performance, I was methodically documenting everything with the attention to detail that had made me an exceptional nurse. I discovered David's laptop password by watching his fingers when he typed, memorizing the pattern of keystrokes during his frequent visits. It was Sophia 2011, his daughter's name combined with her birth year. Not very creative for someone who specialized in protecting other people's assets. I waited for opportunities when he left his computer unattended during visits, usually when he went upstairs to check my medication compliance or inspect some imaginary problem with the house. What I found in his email files was more devastating than I'd dared hope. There were communications with lottery officials about claiming a winning ticket. Legal documents transferring enormous sums of money into offshore accounts I'd never heard of. Financial statements showing investments and purchases that dwarfed anything his law practice could legitimately afford. But most damaging were the personal emails between David and Michelle, discussing their plans with a casual cruelty that took my breath away. From David to Michelle, November 3, 2019, the old bat really believes she's going crazy. Henderson played his part perfectly with that dementia diagnosis. She'll be completely under our control within a month, and then we can start accessing the real money. From Michelle to David, November 15, 2019, your mother asked about the lottery ticket again today when I went to check on her. I told her she was imagining things and she actually apologized to me for bringing up something so obviously delusional. This is almost too easy. Sometimes I think we're being too careful. From David to Michelle, December 20th, 2019, just transferred another $2 million to the Cayman account. The beauty of this plan is that even if the old woman remembers something later, who's going to believe a crazy person? She'll die confused and broke, just like Dad always said she would. I read that last email 3 times before the full implications sank in. Thomas had never said anything about me dying confused and broke. David was using his dead father's name to justify his own cruelty, creating false memories to support his actions just as Head accused me of doing. I printed everything. I saved copies to multiple flash drives hidden throughout my house. I documented every transaction, every forged signature, every lie they'd told Dr. Henderson. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed a way to expose them that would destroy their reputations completely and irreversibly, in a manner so public and undeniable that they could never recover. That's when I discovered the fascinating world of true crime content creators. ID never paid much attention to social media or internet culture, but during my months of research I learned about YouTube channels and podcasts devoted to unsolved mysteries and financial crimes. The production values were surprisingly sophisticated, the audience is enormous, the potential for viral exposure unlimited. One channel in particular caught my attention, Twisted Truth Investigations, hosted by a sharp-eyed former prosecutor named Rachel Martinez who specialized in family financial fraud cases. Her videos regularly received millions of views, and her investigation methods were thorough enough to impress someone with my professional background. I created an anonymous email account and sent Rachel a carefully crafted message that revealed just enough to capture her interest. Subject: Elderly woman's lottery winnings stolen by family. Documentation available. I have extensive evidence of a family conspiracy to steal an elderly woman's $12 million lottery winnings by having her falsely declared mentally incompetent. This case involves attorney misconduct, medical fraud, elder abuse, and financial crimes on a massive scale. I can provide documentation, recordings, financial records, and testimony if you're interested in investigating. She responded within 6 hours, very interested. Can you provide initial verification? Over the next month, I fed Rachel information piece by piece, always maintaining my anonymous status while building her confidence in the story. I provided just enough documentation to verify the basic facts, lottery records, financial transfers, medical evaluations, while carefully holding back the most explosive evidence for maximum impact. Rachel's initial video about my case was released in March 2020. She called it the Vanishing Millions Mystery and focused on the suspicious circumstances surrounding an elderly North Carolina woman's lottery win that had mysteriously disappeared. She didn't use real names, but anyone familiar with our family would recognize the details. The video received 400,000 views in the first week and generated hundreds of comments from viewers outraged by the apparent elder abuse. David was furious when the video reached his attention. He stormed into my house, demanding to know if I'd talked to anyone about our private family business. I played confused and hurt, asking why he would accuse me of spreading stories when I could barely remember what I'd eaten for breakfast. He bought the performance completely, apologizing for doubting me while internally seething about the unwanted attention. But I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. Through the spring and summer of 2020, I continued feeding information to Rachel and 2 other true crime channels that had picked up the story. Each video revealed new layers of the conspiracy, building public interest and outrage while maintaining plausible deniability about my involvement. Meanwhile, I was working on the centerpiece of my revenge, obtaining undeniable audio evidence that would end David and Michelle's lives as they knew them. David had developed a habit of taking sensitive business calls in my kitchen, assuming I was too mentally compromised to understand or remember anything he discussed. In July 2020, I placed a small digital recorder under the kitchen table, hidden beneath a decorative tablecloth that had belonged to my mother. The conversation I captured exceeded my most optimistic expectations. David was on speakerphone with his business partner, discussing strategies for hiding the lottery money from potential IRS scrutiny. Their words were clear, unambiguous, and absolutely incriminating. "Mike," David said, his voice relaxed and confident, "you should see how beautifully this has worked out. My mother actually won $12 million in that scratch-off lottery, but we convinced everyone she's got dementia and imagined the whole thing. We had her declared mentally incompetent and took control of everything. The beauty is, even if she somehow remembers later or starts making accusations, who's going to believe a crazy old lady with documented dementia?" His partner's response was equally damaging. "Jesus, David, that's brutal even for you. But brilliant. What if she somehow gets her memory back or finds proof?" David's laugh was cold and completely without remorse. "Trust me, Mike, that's never going to happen. We've got her so convinced she's losing her mind that she apologizes to us when she brings up the lottery ticket." Dr. Henderson was very helpful in establishing the diagnosis, and now it's all documented in her medical records. She'll die in some state nursing home, still thinking she's crazy, and will inherit everything legitimately when the time comes. I listened to that recording 50 times, each repetition strengthening my resolve and clarifying my plans. They weren't just thieves. They were actively planning my institutional confinement and eventual death, all while stealing money that rightfully belonged to me. By October 2020, exactly 1 year after my lottery win, I was ready to execute the final phase of my revenge. The timing had to be perfect, and I knew exactly when to strike. Sophia, David and Michelle's daughter, was getting married on November 7th to some investment banker's son from one of Charlotte's most prominent families. It was going to be the social event of the season, with 400 guests at the exclusive Quail Hollow Country Club and planned coverage in the Charlotte Observer's Society pages. I'd been invited, of course, though David had expressed concerns about whether I was mentally stable enough to attend such an important social event. I assured him I wouldn't cause any problems, that I understood the importance of the day and would behave appropriately. I kept that promise, technically. 2 days before the wedding, I sent my final, devastating package to Rachel Martinez at Twisted Truth Investigations. It contained everything I'd collected over the past year, the complete email chains between David and Michelle, all the forged financial documents, the fake contractor reports, Dr. Henderson's fraudulent medical evaluations, and the crown jewel, the unedited audio recording of David confessing to stealing my lottery winnings and planning my institutional confinement. I included a simple note: "Please release this exactly 48 hours after you receive it, regardless of timing or circumstances. The truth deserves its perfect moment." The exposé video went live at exactly 2:17 p.m. on November 7th, precisely as the wedding ceremony was beginning at Quail Hollow Country Club. I was sitting in the third row, wearing the navy blue dress I'd purchased specifically for the occasion, watching my granddaughter marry a young man who seemed genuinely kind and completely unaware of what his new in-laws had done to finance their lavish lifestyle. By the time David and Michelle returned from their 2-week honeymoon in Tuscany, Rachel Martinez's 3-part exposé series had been viewed 7.2 million times across all platforms. The story had been picked up by local news channels, shared across every social media platform, and spawned dozens of reaction videos from other true crime creators. The audio recording of David laughing about stealing from his supposedly demented mother became a viral sensation in the worst possible way, generating hashtags like #ElderAbuseExposed and #LotteryThief that trended for days. But I still had one final surprise waiting for them, something that would make their public humiliation seem gentle by comparison. During the year I'd spent gathering evidence and planning their destruction, I'd also been busy with another project, systematically donating every penny of my stolen lottery winnings to the Alzheimer's and Dementia Research Foundation, specifically designated as gifts from the Patterson Family Foundation. $12 million, transferred in careful installments over 8 months, given as anonymous charitable contributions from a family foundation I'd legally established using documents David himself had helped me create during the early stages of his conservatorship. The donations were structured to be completely irrevocable and highly visible, with tax implications that would financially destroy David and Michelle. Under IRS regulations for large charitable gifts, they were now personally responsible for gift taxes on donations made in their family's name, taxes that would amount to nearly 40% of the total donation amount. They owed the federal government $4.8 million they didn't have and couldn't possibly obtain. The Alzheimer's Foundation, thrilled by the unprecedented generosity, had already announced plans for a major gala in their honor, started construction on a research center bearing the Patterson family name, and issued multiple press releases celebrating the Patterson Family Foundation's extraordinary commitment to dementia care and research. When David discovered what I'd done, he came to my house in a rage unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. He was screaming about lawsuits, about financial fraud, about having me arrested for theft and financial crimes. Michelle stood behind him, sobbing hysterically about their destroyed reputation and the impossible tax burden I'd created. I sat calmly at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd discovered my lottery win over a year earlier, and smiled with genuine pleasure. The beautiful thing about your entire plan, David, I said in a voice that was perfectly clear and completely rational, was that it required me to be mentally incompetent. But you can't simultaneously claim that I lacked the mental capacity to make important decisions while also arguing that I was competent enough to be held legally responsible for those same decisions. The law doesn't work both ways. His face went white as the implications became clear. You see, I continued, enjoying every word, if I'm truly mentally incompetent as you claimed in legal documents and medical evaluations, then you're responsible for anything I do with money under your conservatorship. But if I'm mentally competent enough to be held liable for my charitable giving, then I was certainly competent enough to know that you stole my lottery ticket and destroyed my life. He tried to speak, but I wasn't finished. I've donated every stolen penny to fight the exact disease you falsely claimed I had. The IRS will be contacting you about gift taxes you can't possibly pay. The North Carolina State Bar will be reviewing your license for fraud and elder abuse. And the entire world now knows exactly what kind of son steals from his own mother and tries to have her committed to a nursing home. The legal consequences unfolded exactly as I'd planned, like a perfectly choreographed dance of justice. David lost his law license within 4 months as the state bar investigation confirmed everything Rachel Martinez had exposed. His practice collapsed under the weight of the scandal and the massive federal tax debt. Clients fled, employees quit, and the downtown office he'd been so proud of was foreclosed on by the bank. Michelle's boutique clothing store, which had been struggling even before the public relations catastrophe, was forced to close permanently when customers began boycotting it en masse. The Charlotte social circles that had once welcomed them with open arms suddenly found the Patterson name toxic and unmentionable. But the most satisfying consequence was yet to come. Sophia, their daughter whose wedding had provided the perfect backdrop for their public humiliation, was devastated when she learned the full extent of her parents' crimes. The young woman I'd helped raise, whose Halloween costumes I'd sewn by hand and whose soccer games I'd never missed, felt so betrayed and ashamed that she legally changed her last name to her husband's within 6 weeks of returning from her honeymoon. She released a statement through her husband's family publicist, distancing herself completely from David and Michelle. I am horrified to learn what my parents did to my grandmother, a woman who sacrificed everything for our family and deserved nothing but love and respect in return. I will be donating a significant portion of my trust fund to elder abuse prevention organizations, and I want it clearly understood that I consider their actions unforgivable. The statement was picked up by People magazine and shared across social media, generating even more negative attention for David and Michelle while positioning Sophia as a victim of their deception rather than a beneficiary of their crimes. 9 months later, the Alzheimer's and Dementia Research Foundation held their annual gala at the Ritz-Carlton in Charlotte, celebrating major donors and recent research breakthroughs. I attended as their guest of honor, though they had no idea I was connected to their most generous benefactors. David and Michelle had also been invited, their names prominently featured on the invitation as the evening's honorees. They couldn't refuse to attend without generating even more negative publicity, but they also couldn't afford to appear publicly after everything that had been revealed about their crimes. I arrived early and chose a seat in the front row, wearing an elegant black evening gown ID purchased with advance money from my book deal. Yes, I'd written a tell-all memoir about the entire experience, working with a ghostwriter to ensure the story was told with the kind of compelling detail that would resonate with readers. When David and Michelle's photograph appeared on the massive screen behind the podium, when the foundation president thanked them for their unprecedented $12 million donation, when 400 people applauded their supposed generosity, I stood and joined the ovation with genuine enthusiasm. David's face was the color of old paper. Michelle looked like she might faint. But I smiled broadly and whispered just loud enough for them to hear those words I'd been planning for over 2 years. You said I'd die broke and confused, David. Now you will. The foundation president continued his remarks, praising the Patterson family's commitment to fighting the exact disease that had supposedly afflicted me, thanking them for funding research that would help countless families avoid the tragedy of dementia-related financial abuse. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted by some divine sense of justice. After the gala, I moved out of Charlotte permanently. I'd purchased a stunning beachfront condominium in Wilmington using advance payments from my publishing deal, along with investment income from the modest savings I'd accumulated during my nursing career. My memoir, titled Sharper Than They Think, How I Outsmarted the Family That Betrayed Me, was published under the pen name Amy Patterson 6 months later. It became a bestseller within 2 weeks, spent 18 weeks on the New York Times nonfiction list, and was optioned for development as a limited television series. The final chapter included something I'd been saving for maximum impact, a photograph of the real lottery ticket, the one I'd never actually given to David that morning when doubt first crept into my heart. Some instinct had made me substitute a losing ticket I'd bought weeks earlier, keeping the genuine $12 million winner hidden in my hope chest throughout the entire ordeal. For over 2 years, that ticket had served as a tangible reminder that I'd been right all along, that my memory was perfect, that my mind was as sharp as it had ever been. The last page of my book showed a photograph of me on my oceanfront balcony, raising a glass of champagne in celebration while the genuine lottery ticket sat prominently displayed on the table beside me. The Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly in the background, symbolizing the freedom and peace I'd finally achieved. The caption read simply, "Some memories are sharper than they think." That photograph was taken on my 72nd birthday, exactly 3 years after David first told me I was confused about winning the lottery. I'd spent those 3 years proving that underestimating a 70-year-old woman's memory, intelligence, and capacity for strategic thinking was the biggest mistake anyone could make. David calls sometimes, usually late at night when he's been drinking heavily enough to overcome his shame. He leaves rambling voicemail messages that alternate between threats and desperate apologies, between rage at what I've done and pathetic begging for some kind of forgiveness or financial assistance. I listen to these messages occasionally, but I never respond. Some conversations are long overdue, and others should never happen at all. Michelle sent a handwritten letter last Christmas, claiming she'd been manipulated and controlled by David throughout their marriage, insisting she'd always loved and respected me despite all evidence to the contrary. She asked if there was any possibility of reconciliation, any chance I might help with their desperate financial situation now that they'd lost everything. I sent back a printed copy of her email where she'd written about me dying confused and broke, along with a brief note, "I have an excellent memory for people who actually matter." The Research Foundation named their new facility the Martha Patterson Center for Elder Care Innovation and Financial Protection. They have no idea I'm connected to their mysterious donors. I attend their fundraising events occasionally, enjoying the bittersweetness of watching important work being funded by the very people who tried to destroy me. Sophia reached out on my 73rd birthday with a heartfelt letter apologizing for her parents' unforgivable actions and expressing genuine admiration for my resilience and intelligence. She asked if she could visit, if there might be room in my new life for a relationship with her despite the Patterson family name. I told her she was welcome anytime, but that I could never fully trust anyone who shared a last name with the people who'd tried to have me committed to a nursing home. She legally changed her name to her husband's family name 6 weeks later and visits me every few months. She's a good young woman, nothing like her parents, and sometimes true justice includes mercy for the genuinely innocent. I spend my days writing, reading, volunteering at the local hospital where my nursing experience is still valued, and taking long walks along the beach. I have new friends here who know me simply as Martha, the retired nurse who worked for over 4 decades and earned a peaceful retirement by the ocean. They don't know about the lottery, the betrayal, the stolen money, or the perfectly executed revenge. They just know me as someone who's earned her contentment through a lifetime of hard work and service to others. But late at night, when the waves are gentle and the moon creates silver paths across the water, I sometimes take out that lottery ticket and remember the morning that changed everything. I remember the woman I used to be, trusting, naive, desperately eager to believe the best of people who had proven themselves completely unworthy of that faith. I don't miss her. She was kind, but kindness without wisdom is just vulnerability waiting to be exploited by people without conscience. The woman I am now is harder, smarter, infinitely more careful about who deserves access to my trust and affection. I learned that family bonds mean nothing without genuine respect, that blood relation provides no protection against the cruelest forms of betrayal, and that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones who claim to love you while systematically destroying your life. But I also learned that patience and careful planning can overcome almost any disadvantage, that intelligence and determination matter more than age or apparent frailty, and that the best revenge isn't just getting even, it's getting so far ahead that your enemies can never catch up. I won $12 million on a random Tuesday morning with a $5 scratch-off ticket purchased on the recommendation of a kind shopkeeper who believed in lucky numbers. My own family stole that money and tried to convince the world I was losing my mind. They failed catastrophically on both counts. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. They're wrong about the temperature, but right about the timing. The best revenge is served publicly, legally, and with enough documentation to make it absolutely permanent. I'm 74 years old now, and I've never been happier, more peaceful, or more satisfied with the choices I've made. I have enough money to last several lifetimes, a best-selling book that's being adapted for television, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that justice sometimes does prevail when you're patient enough to plan it properly. David and Michelle are divorced now. He drives for a rideshare company and lives in a studio apartment in the worst part of Charlotte. She moved back in with her aging parents and works at a department store cosmetics counter for $12 an hour. They both look decades older than their actual years, worn down by stress, shame, and the permanent consequences of their choices. I saw David at a grocery store last month, and for a moment our eyes met across the produce section. He looked like he wanted to approach me, maybe to apologize or beg for forgiveness or ask for some kind of help. But something in my expression must have changed his mind. Good. Some conversations are long overdue, and others should never happen at all. I selected my apples and vegetables with deliberate care, humming slightly under my breath, and left him standing there among the wilted lettuce and bruised tomatoes, looking every bit as lost and confused as Head once tried to make me feel. The difference is, his confusion is real, it's permanent, and he's earned every single day of it. That's what I call perfect revenge.